Welcome back to Media 7, where we're discussing the future of music with Peter Jenner, Morgan Donoghue and Chris Hockard. But for a moment, we're taking a break from the digital dawn and looking at radio the way it used to be. Simon Pound went to Christchurch and talked to a man who prefers the past.
Sounds historical. New Zealand and New Zealanders, the way we were.
This is Jim Sullivan, oral historian and host of National Radio's much-loved Sunday night show.
Well, the show's called Sounds Historical, and it's designed for an audience that would like to hear about New Zealand's past. Mainly speech, a bit of music.
Jim takes a look back.
As far back, I think, as the 1890s.
And uses a lot of audio from the sound archives. Jim was an archivist there, travelling with them from Timaru to Christchurch. He's now found in Dunedin. A lot of what he plays can seem dated.
We have made our plans and we are determined to stick to them.
But actually, news as we know it is a pretty recent invention.
Radio was established in the 20s. It was simply stated that they had the licence or the agreement, but there should be no controversial matter broadcast. So that's why for the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, we never had a news service, a proper news service, apart from that supplied by the government.
And that non-controversial ruling meant censorship, a lot of censorship.
It's a bit like the famous BBC list of things you don't talk about: sex, religion, bodily functions, and so on.
And those censors were thorough. This is an audition book. It was used at a regional station from the early 50s. Here, they recorded why items were edited or banned. It might have been because of sex, violence, or bad language. Some things were rejected, some were out, and some were really out. Selwyn Toogood, radio legend, features in the audition book in what looks to be a gay sex innuendo shocker. Selwyn Toogood the bottom, John Maybury the top. So maybe although the voices from the past sounded uptight, they weren't actually so different from us today. Jim?
People are the same. I think people are the same. If they have something to say, they'll say it. But I don't think they're in any way as nervous or uptight about the appearance of the media.
And what about today? I was interested in what Jim, an oral and broadcasting historian, thought of shows like Big Brother. Are these a sign of the end times? But he couldn't help us.
I haven't seen anything on television since they went to colour. I don't know what you're talking about.
What Jim does know, better than anyone, is New Zealand radio history. Sunday nights, 8 to 10, on Radio New Zealand National.
Come from a sick bed.
Simon Pound with that report. Well, Peter, so much for the past of radio. I'm interested in what its future is, because it seems to me that with respect to music radio anyway, the focus of music discovery has moved completely away from radio now, and it is on the internet. That's where I find new music.
Yeah, I mean, I would have thought that there's a real possibility that in a few years' time, you know, there'll be 1 million radio stations, because every kid who has a view on music can podcast away and have his own radio stations. And from that, we may find a lot of John Peels. I think
but
radio
who's going
has
to be
a big
hearing
problem.
them? If there are 10,000 radio stations, who hears the new John Peel? That's the problem, isn't it?
Well, I think we can underestimate the way that things can filter through. You know, things do get picked up and people pass the word. If there's someone who's doing good programming, they'll tell their friends who'll tell their friends, and it spreads, and there's no question that will happen. It's a bit random, and there will be, of the thousands of people doing it, most of them will not be listened to by anyone else but their family. But there'll be a few who will grow and they'll become very powerful. And then we'll have to hit them and license them and make sure they pay.
How do you do that within a service like yours, within a subscription service? Because it really is just a whole lot of... All you see on your phone screen is a little bit of text. How do you build that social dimension in?
Well, I think you share friends and playlists and charts, all those great things.
And again, you're competing with the dynamism of the free. You know, the internet has really given us this idea, hasn't it?
But I guess if you don't charge with the data and you then can interact with your friends, I can say, Russell, I know you like this, how about, have a listen to my playlist, and then you can rate it and say that was piss poor, and, try again next week, Morgan. Then I think the interaction, the social networking and the rating is really important.
Because, Chris, I get the impression that these digital shopfronts have actually become a form of marketing in themselves. I mean, if you talk to someone like Fat Freddy's Drop, the fact that they're on iTunes US is important less for what they sell than for the fact that they're there and they get seen all the time. Is that a role of those shops like the ones you're running?
I think Amplifier itself is becoming much more a marketing and media outlet than it is a retail outlet, to be fair, and that's one of the reasons that we drifted towards the aggregation business and could see that coming. But no, I don't know. How does Fat Freddy's get onto iTunes? It's all very well, but how do they get featured on iTunes? That's the trick. Like the example, I was talking to Peter earlier. Yeah, and we were talking about TuneCore, and that just is scary. You know what that is?
Explain that, no.
Okay, it's in effect a free aggregator. Any artist or anyone that creates music or anything can upload their own files and have them aggregated around Napster, iTunes and Amazon and a few others. And the latest figures suggest that in the last 3 months that more music has been uploaded into that service than has been commercially released in the history of popular recorded music. So it's there, and it's all there, and it's all on iTunes. iTunes could brag.
Again, could anyone find it? You know,
well,
are we in danger of drowning in
when do
this
they
commoditised music?
We now have 5 billion songs for you to choose from. Well, that's great, but you know, who's got time to go and look for them all?
Yeah. Well, from my point of view, I use a site called Hype Machine, which I know is legally dodgy, but it actually does. I use the wisdom of the crowd there, and it tells me what's hot.
And I use radio. You know, I use BFM. Listen to that, and hopefully that tells me what to do.
And then people will pay for having someone to sort out what they want to listen to. You know, it's the known unknowns. It's the old Donald Rumsfeld again. You know, that there's music out there that you'd like to hear, and you don't know what it's called, and you don't know who they are, and you will pay for someone to find that for you.
That's Peter Gabriel's got the. Is it Filter? He's just set up another service like that.
Yeah. So it's tastemakers. Same principle as going to a blog and reading their links. Yeah.
I mean, it's the more music that is available, there will be more value in finding the stuff that you want to listen to.
Yeah, and therefore you trust and you trust the people. And you go, OK, I'll go back to them, and they become the new DJs.
Because you've been a proponent of just letting the internet do this and charging an ISP levy that basically it's all you can eat.
I find the word levy, you're not allowed to use that in my presence, I'm afraid. You know,
I probably can't say tax either,
No, you certainly can't say tax. That's dirty language, you know. But you can call it an access to music charge, which you will bury in the ISP charge. It seems to me that, you know, there's no reason when you get your ISP why you shouldn't be paying something towards the content that you're going to be accessing through your ISP. And that's, I think, the principle in which I would like to work with.
Is this something like what the rights collecting agencies like APRA, who we mentioned earlier on, is it something like what they do? Because if I've got a cafe, I can pay an annual fee to APRA for the use of music in my business.
It's exactly like that. And what you I think seems to me that we should be getting away from is charging for them at the margin. You know, if you just get charged for the amount of music you want to use to some extent, then, you know, you shouldn't have to pay for extra. And I think, you know, and that encourages people to listen to more music. When you charge for every piece of music you access, you're discouraging things. You're encouraging people to go for what they know and they're willing to pay for. And I think it's much more interesting if you have a system which encourages people to explore and find new stuff.
Yeah.
How can you run a business like that, though, Chris?
Well,
if you've got nothing to sell, how do you run a business?
Well, you have got something to sell, and then, to be fair, the ISPs have been selling access to everyone else's copyrighted content
just
for a
long,
long time. They're not. Yeah, basically they're taking it for free. You know, they use it in advertising, they do the whole thing, and slowly but surely that's been crept in. But how do you pay for it, and how does the artist get remunerated? That's the real issue. And from my point of view, the issue isn't Rihanna or Chris Brown or someone like that, because they're well looked after by a large record company that is used to licensing and used to collecting their rights. The issue is with SJD or, you know, the small bands that are still doing well, that people are still downloading, and how do they get paid? Yeah,
actually, before we run out of time, I want to bring up something we mentioned SJD earlier on, is so-called, called in the industry, synchronisation deals, the licensing of music to go with moving pictures.
The great new way of selling a record in New Zealand, isn't it?
Yeah, it's become more important than sales, isn't it?
It's the only marketing left.
For years, though. Well, Golden Horse did it in 2000.
Yeah, they did. They did it with a couple of things at the same time. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But Yeah, the traditional role of the record company, you go to the major label, it's the one that you go through, which is, you know, the young band, they learn a song, they get a manager, the manager shops into a record company, the record company makes them famous, that whole routine. Yeah. When the record companies are starved of cash, as they are, and they're no longer investing in marketing the way that they were, suddenly you get something like the Op Shop campaign or the LMNOP thing, and they stand out like dog's balls, really, because suddenly you get massive exposure to those songs again, and surprise, people hear them, they listen to them, they wouldn't have heard them otherwise.
And it's marketing, isn't it?
It's marketing, it picks up their sales, and they get paid at the same time. So they get a licence fee for it being used, plus it drives sales again, and it drives their exposure, and it drives their live, and it drives every other aspect.
Peter, we're almost out of time, but you've been critical of the major labels, you know, quite strongly over the years. Where are they going to be in 5 years' time? Are they going to be around? Are we going to be looking at something that looks more like the book trade, where there's a lot less money washing around and you know, far fewer people are getting wealthy? Are we going to see indies dominating the scene? What's going to happen?
I would personally suspect that it's going to be less mass market and more a massive niche markets, and therefore that there'll be a lot more trade through things like sort of heavy metal, and but then all segmented types of heavy metal. You won't just have a heavy metal site, you'll have a particular type of death metal or whatever it's called, you know, and like all the different types of dance music, you know, which are all very sort of tight things, which will be very much more international. And I think that's going to be one of the areas which will be quite interesting. I think the record companies will survive if they can get it together to change their business model. They've got such a hold on the catalogue that it's going to be very hard to get rid of them. I suspect they'll go through lots of different ownerships, just like the film companies in the 50s and 60s. I think they're going to be bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold, and in another 10 years they'll be unrecognisable, but they'll still be called EMI and Warner Brothers and all the rest of it. And they'll be owned by totally different people, and they'll have a totally different business model.
Well, I'm sure that will be good to watch. Unfortunately, we are out of time to discuss the topic further, but thank you to our panellists, Peter Jenner, Morgan Donoghue and Chris Hockard, and thank you for watching. We'll be back with Media 7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.